Good evening, Canby, and welcome to the Canby Urban Renewal Agency special meeting of December 7th, 2016. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And so on this anniversary of December 7th, I'd like us all to take a moment to remember our military, first responders, medical, State Department, intelligence forces, all those who stand in harm's way to keep us and our country safe. Thank you. Please be seated. First up on the agenda, community announcements. Kim, do you have anything for us tonight? All right. Or Rick, any announcements yet?
I do not.
All right. First opportunity for citizen input tonight. Do we have any citizens that wish to speak? And seeing no one rush up here, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
I move to approve the minutes, the consent agenda, which include the minutes from the October 5th, 2016 Urban Renewal District Agency Special Meeting.
A second.
It's been moved by Vice Chair Hodson and seconded by Commissioner Hensley to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the October 5th, 2016 URD Agency Special Meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the consent agenda passes. Next up tonight, we have a public hearing on just a really huge project that we're very glad to see come before the agency tonight. It's the culmination of, I was talking with Rick, at least 18 months of work, so it's an exciting night for us. Kim, would you like us to go straight into the public hearing format at this time?
Yeah, usually that's what.
All righty, very good. So bear with me while I read the following. The matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out a yellow public testimony card and give it to the city recorder. At the appropriate time, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and interest in the matter. Those people that are interested in testifying as either proponents or opponents, please indicate your desire to speak by raising your hands at this time. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time for one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, the staff report, followed by questions, if any, from the agency and staff. Then we'll have open public hearing for testimony, starting with proponents, not more than 3 minutes each, and then opponents, not more than 3 minutes each. We'll then close the public hearing, follow up with questions, if any, by the agency, and then open discussion by the agency. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure of the hearing? Are we good? All right. With that, we will start with the staff report. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you this evening. As has been indicated, this is the culmination of 18 months of ongoing work with Mary Hanlon, representing CCB, and before that, Hanlon Development. And we are very happy to have her in the audience this evening. This project is actually one that we started just over 2 years ago. When we issued requests for expressions of interest to for project proposals for any or all of the property that we call the City Hall block. And I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to provide some additional information during. I'd also like to acknowledge Renata Mengelberg, who is in the audience as well, our Economic Development Director, without whose work this project would not be a success. And again, to Mary, who's just been an extraordinary partner as we've tried to collaborate on a way that will allow us to bring this project to Canby. The project we defined as the city downtown block done by the Canby Urban Renewal Agency, and the project is the Dahlia, which is appropriate for Canby. You may think that the spelling is incorrect, however, it's not. That's the Spanish spelling for Dahlia. And so we wanted to stay true to that. The property description. The property is located within our central downtown Canby core. It's bordered on North Ivy Street, Northwest 2nd Avenue, North Holly, and Northwest 1st Avenue. Proposed project include the old police department, city hall, finance, planning, and the transit parking lot immediately behind the finance building. Planning efforts conducted by the city have included zoning regulations to facilitate the revitalization of downtown Canby and to encourage the development of high-density mixed-use development in our downtown core. And as several of you were a party to, the creation in the last couple of years of a vertical housing development zone tax incentive, which required your specific action to implement in our downtown core. The City Council has been involved in reviewing this project for some time at executive sessions on April 6th, September 16th, and November 18th of 2015 and July 6th of 2016. You found the project to be consistent with the city and urban renewal objectives, and you have granted the city staff the authority to continue to proceed forward with this project, and that's why we find ourselves where we are tonight. City Hall and Finance Building, for those who are not immediately familiar, the City Hall is on the right side. You'll actually have this building later in the City Council agenda to consider recognizing it as a local historic building, a move that is very important to us as we proceed with this project because it does preserve in perpetuity the exterior facade of the building. And then further in the distance is our finance building, the light green older building. Looking from the east to west, you can see the old planning department tucked back in the finance building and our city hall buildings. As I'd indicated to you in my opening remarks, we did do an RFEI, request for expressions of interest, and I believe we sent that out in November or December of 2014. So it's been just over 2 years. And when we sent those the RFEI out, we asked for responses for any or all of the properties, and there's the finance building and city hall. And we did receive a couple different responses. We actually received 4 responses, of which we identified 2 to continue negotiations, ultimately selecting Hanlon Development to continue exclusive negotiations with. One of the questions that has been asked is, why are we considering a building like this in downtown Canby at this time? And I would tell you that one of the reasons is because your Canby Community Visioning document anticipated and identified it as a priority. Priority gap was to integrate mixed-use office and/or residential over retail within the downtown zone, specifically what the Dahlia is proposed to do. The action steps including encouraging higher density residential developments in and near the downtown core, so more residents would be able to walk to shops, restaurants, and services and access bus service, and as you know, bus service is just right across the street, and encourage high-quality development through flexibility and inducements in the zoning and development code. And this is a very important aspect of this project as well, because one of the criteria that we had in working with Mary was that the development as it rolled forward had to be of a very high quality. And the underlying goal is to create an environment in the downtown community, and in fact almost a captive audience living downtown that would access services that are available to them in our downtown core. So a way to revitalize our downtown core. What are some of the benefits of mixed-use housing development on Main Street? And this is based on national information. Each upper floor unit is worth about $9,000 in annual spending, and we know much of that is going to be spent downtown. These apartments, as they are proposed to be developed, and we'll show you a little bit of that in a few minutes, are going to be one-story and, one-bedroom and studio apartments exclusively. And so we would anticipate, I know if I was living in a one-bedroom or studio, I would spend a lot of time walking downtown to buy my groceries. I'd spend it going to restaurants, shopping locally, and kind of enjoying the ambiance of downtown. We know that stacking development profoundly impacts tax production. Multi-story mixed-use buildings produce more taxes per acre. In our case, the multiplier is 5 to 6 times. I'll be showing you that information as we go forward, what it would be if we just left the property as it currently is. Properties with occupied floors have roughly 50% higher property values, and the potential to support higher rents for upper floors with targeting, design, and marketing is much greater, which is what, again, you have here with the type of finish and design that is part of this project. A developer selection process, I've touched on that. I'll touch on it again very quickly. In late 2014, we issued an RFEI for the 5 city-owned properties. We received 4 responses, shortlisting 2. Following an evaluation of the merits, the city elected to enter into an exclusive negotiation agreement with Mary Hanlon, who has subsequently created the Canby Civic Block LLC. How did the Urban Renewal Agency end up as the project administrator for this project if it goes forward? It was a decision that you, sitting as a city council, made, and you, sitting as an Urban Renewal Agency, agreed to. Our property is located within our Urban Renewal Agency boundary. Staff looked at and shared with you the challenges and opportunities presented in this project, and we recommended to you that our greatest opportunity would be to embrace the tenet upon which urban renewal is founded, and that is the ability to leverage tax increment to create improvements within the agency boundaries. You've declared the property no longer required for city use when sitting as a city council, and transferred the property from the city to the Urban Renewal Agency. And the Urban Renewal Agency has accepted the property transfer, and we have made the amendment to our urban renewal plan so that the downtown city block project is now incorporated into our urban renewal plan. And that's actually a very important element as well. Before you is a picture of the proposed mixed-use development. Sits on the corner of North Ivy and Northwest 2nd Avenue. You've seen this on the front page of the newspaper, and we've tried to be very public and very open with the design concept so that any comments and interaction that could occur, we would have an opportunity to really respond appropriately to. The floor plan. As you can see, there are 4 stories. The first floor is commercial retail space, and there are approximately 8,000 square feet of commercial retail space. The upper 3 floors have a total of 69 studio and 1-bedroom apartments, and the shaded area on the first floor is a kind of a common area. Would include the the apartment manager space. It would include a common area for the tenants of the apartments, and just kind of a gathering area and a place to meet. How are we going to use the land that's been developed? This is a elevation showing how the land was going to be, is proposed to be divided up and allocated. In the lower right-hand corner is all of our insurance. That, of course, stays. The finance building and planning building, as well as the old council chambers, would all be demolished and removed from the site. We would do the developer would be required to purchase Canby Utility, and I will tell you that one of the positive outcomes in this project is the Canby Utility program property goes back on the tax rolls, something that wouldn't happen otherwise, and that's a $900,000 acquisition. So that actually has an immediate positive benefit that I have not factored into any of the calculations, because I wanted you to see truly what our level of contribution and return is going to be. So you can see the shaded area to the lower part is where the access to the parking area would be. I've got a parking plan that I'll show you in just a few minutes. And the police department building in the lower left and the city hall in the upper left would be developed in the second and third phase of the DDA, and that's outlined in the disposition and development agreement itself. We would tackle the big project first, and then we would move forward with the other two projects in succession. We've had a number of questions about how parking is going to happen in the downtown area, and I wanted to make sure that we fully disclose what the parking impact is going to be, and give people a clear understanding that, in fact, there is quite a bit of parking right around the block, and this is on Holly 1st, 2nd, and Ivy, just immediately around the building. A total of 131 parking spaces, including 34 on-site parking spaces, 61 spaces on adjacent, plus the First Avenue parking lot. And then on the opposite side of Holly, First Avenue and 2nd, there are an additional 36 spaces. What I haven't included in that 131 count are the 8 spaces that would continue to be available for Canby Utility for the time period that they're continuing to lease this property. So I could have said 139 spaces, but trying to be conservative in this approach and show you just what isn't probably already spoken for, there are 131 spaces, which leaves parking for Canby Utility separately. So how does the project affect our ability to generate property taxes on this property, and what does it do to property values? And I've actually done 3 analyses, and here I'm showing you 2 of those 3, and as we proceed forward on the fiscal side, I'll show you some additional. The 2014 estimated value of the city property was $2,097,000. The Urban Renewal Agency tax increment revenue over a 10-year period, assuming a 3% growth in assessed value, which is what the assessor generally uses in projecting, would generate about $348,457 if the property was just, each of the pieces were sold individually at their current market value. If we were only looking at the general fund and look out 10 years into 2028, that number to the general fund would be $8,357, and I'll explain why I went out to 2028 in just a minute. And the estimated tax revenue in 2028 for all of the other taxing districts that will receive tax increment after the Urban Renewal Agency is retired is $32,493. Looking on the right side, what happens if the proposed project improvements are done, and again, focusing principally on the dahlia for this analysis, and the numbers will only go up, as I'll show you on the accompanying slides. We expect a private investment in the $11.5 million range, our contribution of $3.4 million. In calculating this, I only assigned a $12.5 million real market value associated with this, and it could range anywhere from 12.5 to 15 million, but in doing this financial analysis, I wanted to give you the low number, the most conservative approach of $12.5 million. In calculating the tax increment, I took 85% of the real market value, which is basically a 15% deduction for the difference between real market value and assessed value. And the assessor taxes on assessed value, while real market value is, in theory at least, the value in an arm's length transaction that a seller would receive from a buyer for the same property. So for this same project, with this done, we'd be looking at urban renewal tax increment of $1,142,000. The difference between just selling the property individually and doing this development is about $794,000 over a 10-year period. The estimated annual general fund revenue in 2028 is $49,000 for a difference of $41,000, and this is on an annualized basis. And the estimated annual tax revenue for all of the other taxing jurisdictions, $183,000, almost $184,000, against against the $32,000 for just selling the property as it is, so a difference of $151,000. I showed you 2028 because in the first 10 years of the project is eligible for a investment tax credit of 60% of the value of the upper 3 floors. And as we go through and I'll try not to go into so much detail that I put you all to sleep when we talk about the financial numbers, but I know that they're relevant to you and you need to hear them. But what I've given you is in 2028, the Urban Renewal Agency paid off or not, we would see about $50,000 going to the city because the tax credit would have expired, and we'd see the $183,000 going to the taxing jurisdictions versus the $32,000 if we don't do the project because the tax credit would have expired. I've given you kind of the assumptions that I used for the city contribution and the $12.5 million as a conservative with $12.5 to $15 million, and again using a 3% annual growth. So one of the questions that was raised is what happens under a middle scenario? What if we take the property that values, what if we take the individual properties that we have and we do TIs on those properties and then we sell them? Or we sell them and we do sell them with TIs. And so I looked at that as well, and what I've given you here are the scenarios for each of the 5 properties with the City Hall estimated value at public sale. And I would say these are probably slightly high, but again, I wanted to err on the side of as conservative as I could on the relative to the value on sale. Looking at City Hall, estimated value at public sale of $550,000, adjustment real market value to assessed value drops that by 15% of $467. So that's the taxable value. Tax generated to the Urban Renewal Agency, about $8,000. Tax generated to the city. If we didn't have an Urban Renewal Agency, is $1,631. So the second question is, what happens if we put money into these buildings and improve them to a standard so that a new purchaser could use them for a proposed use? And one thing that we know is that if we have a $550,000 building and we put $500,000 in, it doesn't increase it to $1 million building. It increases it to a usable building that's somewhere in the $700,000 to $800,000 range typically. So I've given that an estimated value of $750,000. And to be consistent, I've given it the same value in the what happens if we do the whole downtown block as a part of the Canby, the CCB project. So the $750,000 adjustment for real market value to assessed value of $637,500. Tax generated to the Urban Renewal Agency under this scenario would be $10,871, and tax generated to the city after the Urban Renewal Agency, you can see the $1,600 versus $2,224 in each of those scenarios. Looking at the police department, I did the same thing. Saw a value at sale of $560, a real market value of $750 if we did tenant improvements, and then carrying that forward to real market value of $750 if it's part of the larger project. And you can see how those numbers flow down point to point. 85% is the assessed value and tax generated to each of the taxing jurisdictions. For finance, same thing, except I assigned finance a 0 value on the new project because we would be demolishing finance, and again, staying as conservative as I could, I did not assign a value to the real property, the land portion of it. And that is just trying to be as conservative as possible, because what we're looking at, what I was looking for is how much we could conservatively expect to generate in terms of taxes. Transit parking lot, I did the same thing, has a value of $100,000. There really are no TIs to be done, so $100,000 if it goes into the project. I took the value out of it, did not add that to the project. Planning department did exactly the same thing. Planning department was remodeled a couple years ago, so we wouldn't see a lot of increase in value of the planning department, $587 to $600,000, and again, that would be demoed. So I took the value out in calculating what would happen on the mixed-use project. So what happens if we do the mixed-use development, the Dahlia Apartments? I had, and there was just too much information. I had given you initially a spread of between 12.5 and 15 million and worked that calculation down, but it was just too much information. So following through, just looking at the low values, you can see 12.5 million with an adjusted assessed value of 10.6 million. The tax generated to the Urban Renewal Agency in year one before a tax credit would be 181,000. The tax credit is 60% of the tax of the residential housing, and assuming that the values are roughly equivalent for the floors, the net tax generated would be $99,000, and the tax generated to the Urban Renewal Agency, the City of Canby after the Urban Renewal Agency is $37,000. And then I summarize that quickly for you, looking at the annual tax generated at $30,000, and this is year one, versus $6,000 if there wasn't an Urban Renewal Agency and the taxes just flowed to the city in year one. Sale with Urban Renewal Assistance would go up some 37 to 7, and the mixed-use development would go to 99,000 and 37,000 in year one. So then I said, well, you may not believe me even with all of this. So I went out and did a 20-year analysis to show you where the how the numbers are calculated on a year-to-year basis, assuming a 3% growth per year under the three different scenarios, looking at the Urban Renewal Agency or the city alone, and under the three scenarios that I showed you. Basically, the city's cash contribution would be paid off in year one, year 11, as I recall, and the total contribution, which would include land and improvements, if you value the buildings and property at their sale today value would take to 20 years to pay. And that's using the most conservative numbers. If you weren't interested in recovering the value of those properties in urban renewal projects, we typically aren't. We're trying to get property back into private hands and in private development, because the goal is to enhance and improve the overall economy in the area in which the improvement is being done. Then you'd be looking at a return on your hard dollar investment, which is the pickup of STCs of about $611,000 and a cash contribution over the construction period of an additional $700,000. So you'd be picking that up in about year 11, as I recall. What is a disposition and development agreement? A disposition development agreement is really just a real property purchase agreement, only it has a lot of strings attached to it. It defines, I think, in much more detail the responsibilities of both the developer and of the developer's partner, in this case the Urban Renewal Agency. And the next question you might ask is, do we have the authority to do this? And the answer, according to OregonGovernmentLaw.com and ORS 457.180 and 457.230 is, yes, we do. We have the authority to do this. And you can read those at your convenience, but they basically say that you have the ability to do this, and you can make any deal that you feel is in the public interest. So one of the questions is, what happens to this property if we start down the road and something goes haywire? And the second question is, okay, what are our obligations to each other through the term of the project? First, I will tell you, and Councillor Smith asked me a very on-point question, and I want to respond to it right up front. The Urban Renewal Agency will be required to subordinate to the commercial lender the construction loan. And that will be the same in any property transaction that you do with any developer. I think that the developer is working towards about a 65% loan to value from the commercial. These deals do not get done, period, unless the public partner is willing to subordinate the commercial loan. Now, some of the mitigating factors in this, some of the factors mitigated in this are identified and addressed as part of the DDA. A successor in interest can only build the project that we agreed to in the DDA, so it can't change hands and somebody else build a one-story coffee shop. It has to be what it is. The developer, because they're taking a commercial loan, gets draws based on percentage of completion. So at any point in time, the development will be funded only to the extent that it's complete. So our risk at the outside, if the developer were to default, is that either the commercial lender would take over the project and complete it under the terms that we have identified, or alternatively, they would decide that they can't complete it, and we would step in at what in fact would be a bargain price and pay back to the commercial lender the amount that they had lent, and then we would have the authority under the terms of this DDA to pursue any remedy that we needed to against the developer. And those are all terms that are existing in this current DDA. The nature of a project like this is such that it is not without risk. Every project, the project that you are sitting in conducting this meeting today, had risk. We were building at a time, we were fast-tracking the project, we made assumptions, and then we were able to fulfill our commitment to you under those assumptions and deliver to you a project that met all the guidelines that we'd established. But ultimately, a deal like this, for it to be successful with such a small margin for all parties, is there has to be an element of trust that exists between the developer and the agency in order for it to be successful. In this case, we have developed that trust, and I have a tremendous confidence in our developers' abilities to deliver a completed project, and tremendous confidence in the disposition and development agreement to protect us if something outside of the scope of what we expected were to happen. So assignment provisions, the developer can't dispose of a sign or otherwise divest itself of any interest in or obligations without our permission, and that permission is granted in our sole discretion. We can require absolute conditions to approval, that the transfer assignment is not in violation of any other provisions of the agreement, and proposed transferee or assignee must have the qualifications and financial responsibility equal to or superior to those of Hanlon. These are all conditions that are built in the DDA. Proposed transfer or assignee is required to assume without limitation all obligations that are part of the project as defined in the DDA. The Hanlon must guarantee the transferee's assignee's performance in a form satisfactory to the owner. So we have control under all of these conditions. If all these conditions are met, we cannot unreasonably withhold approval. So what this in fact means is that we have conditions that have to be met. If those conditions are met and Hanlon presents something for assignment, we can't say no just because we don't like the color of somebody's car that they drive. That's just how it works. This is a project that we are hoping will be not subject to BOLI wages, and we've agreed to submit to the Bureau of Labor and Industries for review and seeking a determination letter from BOLI to find out definitively if this project is subject to prevailing wage rates. I would say that once the BOLI letter is submitted and a decision is made, that the risk transfers solely to the developer. So if BOLI comes back at a later time and says, oh, something happened, the terms changed, something changed, and new facts have come into evidence, then that's on the developer and it's not on us, and that's clearly identified as part of our development agreement. Responsibilities of the party. Hanlon is required to secure all land use and development review approvals. We have to submit a determination letter to BOLI. We have to have initiated the listing of the City Hall. To the Historic Registry nomination, we have to be prepared to issue a release letter for the release of building permits when they have met all of the conditions and qualifications, and neither party can be in default under any material term or condition of the agreement, including the completion of each task shown in the schedule of performance. Hanlon has to review and approve the results of its due diligence of the project feasibility, including survey title, geotech, environmental, and all of the other elements. The escrow agent will have issued Hanlon a binding commitment. Hanlon will have approved and accepted responsibility for conducting off-site improvements. We know, based on the fact that the traffic study has already been completed, that there are no requirements relative to traffic mitigation that are going to be imposed on this project. We think that the only conditions that we're looking at are improvements to sidewalk and parking entries, most principally on 2nd Avenue, where we have entrances now that will be removed and turned into to sidewalks. And then we have a responsibility to review and approve any assignments of interest that are submitted by Hanlon through the course of this process. Full construction plan set relating to the project is required to be approved by owner, so we do have veto authority. We have to give or deny that approval on our sole discretion, but we can't delay our decision. Hanlon must provide us with a certified copy of its articles of incorporation. We need to make sure that they exist. Hanlon must submit a final construction budget, including hard and soft costs necessary to construct the project that's in conformance with the project budget for our review and approval in our sole reasonable discretion. And we can't condition, withhold, or unreasonably delay our approval. This is another area that we have some additional protections in the project as it moves forward relative to our term as in subordination of our position for reimbursement upon default. Hanlon will have to receive a construction financing commitment that in Hanlon's discretion is sufficient to complete construction of the project, and we have to agree that it's appropriate to and meets our conditions. Hanlon cannot be in default under any material term or condition of the agreement, and she has to tell us that there are no events that have occurred that would constitute a material default, even if she hasn't disclosed them previously to us prior to being able to pursue and move forward with the project. And Hanlon must demonstrate control and ownership of Canby utility property. Default would occur if Hanlon breaches any material provision of the agreement. She does have an opportunity to remedy any breach within 30 days after she's received notice of us that she's of that breach and identifying the breach. If Hanlon makes any assignment for the benefit of her creditors or is adjudicated as bankrupt or receiver trustee, that's not removed within 180 days after appointment. If that also constitutes a default, if Hanlon or their signee constructs or operates any portion of the project in a manner inconsistent with the owner-approved plans, or if they fail to adhere to the schedule of performance for any element subject to events beyond their control or our control as described in section 8.9. We default if we breach any material provision of the agreement, if we fail to adhere to the schedule of performance, if we fail to perform any specific environmental remediation work for which we are responsible, and we don't remedy that breach. We can, at our option, terminate the agreement by written notice. We can specifically enforce the obligation under Hanlon under the agreement, and if we terminate this agreement as provided under Section 8.2, then Hanlon is required to deliver to us all of her working documentation, including project market research, design documents, engineering document, performance, financial projections, and design and construction contracts. So we get all of the work product of Hanlon if she defaults, which makes it possible for us or a successor, if we decide to rely on a successor, to complete the project as it has been spec'd, as it has been agreed to, and as we've moved forward with. If a mortgage forecloses upon the property and it's not the purchaser, then that mortgagee is deemed pursuant to the DDA to have automatically assumed all of Hanlon's obligations under the agreement. Transfer will not cause material delay in the completion of the project, and will not change final construction plans or the character of the project, and she cannot be relieved of obligations under the agreement by reason of any permitted transfer unless we agree in writing. There are a lot of elements to this project. Obviously, for a project to take 18 months to properly negotiate, build in the give and take that associated with this project has been substantial on both parties' parts, and as noted in the staff recommendations pursuant to the finalization of the public hearing, staff recommendations are to approve the resolution as noted. That does conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Rick. Does anyone have any questions for Rick?
Just a comment, outstanding job on putting that together and all your hard work together on that.
President Dale, yes, I have a few. I don't want to keep us here till snowpocalypse, but I did have a few quick questions. First, I love the idea of the multi-story building. I think Rick's done a fantastic job, but I had a couple of detailed questions I wanted to make sure that I understood, if you can try and answer these. On page 12 of the development agreement, there is a statement, I'll let you flip to it, and 3.01 that says that CCB and its successors and assignees will devote the property, capital property, to use as mixed-use development with both residential and retail uses for a period of at least 30 years. My question was based on that. I mean, that's residential and retail, which are in land use parlance are very specific uses, which might exclude some other types of businesses. And I was curious if those were being used as terms of arts there, or if those were, we have, it's in the DCO, which is the C1, which allows other things, but that might restrict.
Yeah, and that is a general statement and not the specific, and not a term of art. We anticipate that the properties could be used for retail, commercial, and restaurant uses.
Okay.
And so I think that clarification is appropriate, and well, and if everyone's in agreement, we can note that in the minutes, that just for clarification purposes, that for the purposes of the DDA, when retail is specified, it does expand to include retail, commercial, and restaurant use.
What I should clarify on that is because the property is only defined as the whole area,
Right.
which has the other buildings
Absolutely.
in it, not just the four-story building.
Yeah, that's a great catch.
Thank you. And then Rick gave a great answer on this. This is what I asked him before. I wanted to just make sure that the rest of the council members have when we're talking about subordination, that means if somehow CCB was to ever fold up shop and go home and quit construction in the middle of it, we would then essentially be able to retake possession, but then we would have to buy out the mortgage, or somebody, we'd still have to pay off any outstanding provision of their construction mortgage. So there could be another capital outlay in that sort of series of horrible events if it ever took place. And that was why I'd asked that question. A couple more. We went on page 34, we had the deed itself. And it said the true and actual consideration for the entire parcel, all of that whole block, or most of the block, was $200.
That's correct.
How and why were we able to select a $200 consideration amount for $2 million worth of real property?
Well, the Urban Renewal Agency have placed such stringent restrictions and requirements on the project that if the property upon which the project is going to be constructed is sold at even a significant percentage of what is identified value based on individual sales, that the project is not feasible. So under urban renewal law, we have an absolute right to assign a value, any value or no value at all, to the property, and the $200 is a nominal value, meets the legal requirement as being consideration, but also recognizes that because we're requiring first floor commercial retail slash restaurant space to be developed, and lenders won't lend on commercial retail space, that in order for us to accomplish what we want to and desire to as an urban renewal agency, we needed to make a concession on price. So the $200 is a nominal amount to meet the consideration test, but it's recognized that it does not begin to approach value.
Okay. Thank you. One more, you already answered this for me when you explained this project to me, but can you explain again? And the answer is satisfactory to me, but my concern was basically how do we know that, and how do we respond or address concerns that approximately $3.4 million in city assets, benefits, or property is not somehow going to excessively into the return on investment of a developer?
Well, we know that the project is not possible. First of all, the urban renewal agencies have an absolute right to identify projects that they feel are going to be a particular benefit to the area in which the urban renewal boundaries are, within which the urban renewal boundaries are defined. So it is a project that you can do. In looking at the value of the project and the value added to the downtown community of constructing a 4-story building worth $12.5 million or selling a piece of property for $3 million, it just makes business sense to try to find a way to really expand the taxable value and the overall value of the property itself, and at the same time improve the downtown business climate to businesses that live, work, and survive in our downtown core. We anticipate that there's about a 6 times multiplier for in comparing the difference between just selling the property and doing the development, meaning $100,000 in assessed value or in property taxes if sold individually would equate to $600,000 on this project once the 10-year period has expired. Our return on investment is, even if you include the full retail value of all of the properties, is 20 years. Our return on investment of our SDC contribution and the cash contribution of $700,000 is just under 11 years, which means that the benefit to the ultimately benefiting property tax agencies within who receive tax increment in the downtown core is a 6-fold increase. So we think that over the long run it benefits the downtown business community, it benefits the city as a taxing jurisdiction, and it benefits every other taxing jurisdiction that exists and collects taxes within this city tax rate area.
President, just 2 more if I can. You explained the 10 to 20 year that sort of we recapture any of all the investments sort of that we're making into it in around 20 years. But I was curious, does that take into account at all any of the use of that, what would have been, I guess, $2 million in sale proceeds if we just sold those, and any kind of an interest or opportunity use of that $2 million during that 20-year period?
No, I didn't do, and I purposefully left that out. I actually started to do that calculation, and interest rates being what they are, 3% multiplier. It's one of the reasons I went to the lowest possible number in computing the real property value and assessed value on these properties, is to take that into consideration over the life of the property, and why I went to the high values in looking at what this property would sell for if we put it on the market today. So I didn't build a separate analysis for that. It was something I considered, but it just added too much additional information, and it didn't really change the underlying proposal, which is a downtown development to serve the downtown core that is, by definition, an urban renewal project constructed for that express purpose. So getting back to our core mission and goals, it wouldn't have added value to the decision process. It would have only been interesting information.
One more. In your PowerPoint slides on number 27, it said, you explained that the developer essentially could not assign, is on the assignment part, the assignment provisions, that the developer could not assign any, wholly, partially or wholly. Isn't that only until the certificate of completion is issued?
Yeah, once certificate of completion is issued, then the developer controls that, but there's still the overarching requirement to operate for 30 years in in its format that survives every other aspect of this. So the assignment still, and these provisions in the DDA still require that this project continue as it's been designed and as it's been agreed to be operated on for a 30-year period, which is 10 years beyond even the most conservative projection. And all the calculations that I did in identifying this project and looking at the tax benefit to the taxing jurisdictions and the ability to get the property back on the tax rolls instead of having them somewhere else, which is non-taxed as publicly owned property, it was kind of an important assumption, but an assumption nevertheless, and I didn't try to calculate the value of that either. So, I won't say I tried to simplify this, but I tried to really focus on the issues and the elements that were most important to you.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, if I could, so what I'm understanding is they can't sell it at all without our permission until after the certificate of completion, and then theoretically they could sell it as long as all the contracts and obligations were followed?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Fantastic amount of work you've done on this, and I appreciate you answering the questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other commissioners have questions?
Is now the time to ask about phase 2 or 3, or should I wait, timing-wise?
No, you can ask about those, and they're part of the DDA. We just realized that, and this is all part of our ongoing discussion and negotiation, we'll be creating a phase 2 schedule and whichever the exhibit number is in here, and a phase 3 schedule and exhibit for the City Hall and the police building. But it was my desire to put everything into our mixed-use building first, so that we can get the biggest value back on the tax roll as quick as we can. And at the same time, Hanlon, the CCB, will be marketing the other 2 buildings, and when we find a tenant, then they can shift into those project areas. But we didn't want to put in the total the budget that you saw that was an inclusive budget, and we didn't want to stick in arbitrary numbers in the City Hall and the Finance Building, because the improvements are going to be dependent to a greater rather than a lesser degree on who the tenants are. If we get a brew pub, for instance, those TIs are going to be very expensive as compared with a commercial use of a portion of City Hall. And so we didn't try to anticipate what they were going to be. We know the costs are going to be significant in order to do the kind of work that the developer plans to do on it, but I didn't want to create something that was artificial, and this felt too artificial. We do have some numbers we're pretty confident in the Dahlia project, and confident moving forward with that, but I didn't want to give you artificial numbers when we know we have the ability to go back and create those as we go forward based on real tenancy and real ability. And we do have the same ability as we go forward. Dahlia is completed and we're not satisfied, or the developer's not meeting their targeted goals in phase 2 or phase 3. We have the opportunity, based on failure to perform, to take those properties back. And so, that's the potential that we have with that. And so it's kind of the best of both worlds for us.
As we go on, could the developer sell back those properties? I mean, this old police...
Well, they could
building.
give them back to us, yeah.
Okay, or give, right?
Yeah, and then we would take them back, and because our investment is in the first floor of the mixed-use development. That's where nobody wants to, no commercial lender wants to lend, and that's where we're getting the biggest bang. That project pays for everything else from the urban renewal agency's perspective. The tax increment that I've identified is based on that project being done.
Good.
Thank you. Excuse me, sorry, fighting a head cold. My question's about the bully aspect. Has that letter already been sent off? And then what are our chances of that
those, I guess, the prevailing wage being waived?
We're within about, excuse me, we're within about a week of sending that off. We've run it through our council, and it's going through Mary's council now, and it'll go back to us, and then we have a consultant also working on it. I think that the probability is pretty darn good that, because we've made a really strong case that this project isn't possible without the city's concessions, and once you identify those and you can place an objective value on the portions that we're requiring, then I think that our bullet case is actually quite strong.
Thank you.
Other questions by the agency at this time? You'll have another opportunity in a bit. All righty. Well, if that's the case, then we'll proceed with the public portion of the testimony. So I'll open the public hearing. And first up, we'll ask for any proponents, that is, those who are in favor of the matter before the agency. And first up, I have Mary Hanlon. Let's come on up.
You could push your little green button on your,
Is it,
Microphone.
if it's red, can you push it till it's green?
yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Thanks.
At first, I just want to say it's a real pleasure to be here, and I haven't had the opportunity to meet all of you, and I've been working really closely with Rick and Renata in particular, and I can easily say they're some of the brightest and most capable professionals I've ever worked with. So, I applaud you for having them on your staff, and everyone else has been a pleasure as well. Brian Brown is amazing, and Jamie, and I love seeing Laney, and there are a lot of elements about this project, but primarily the people that are working on it that make it special. I have been doing housing and community development for over 30 years, and in the private sector as well as the public sector. And I feel very passionately about the whole concept, and this is a really exciting project. And I think it shows a lot of vision on your part to understand the impact that it will have on your community. You have a beautiful downtown historic area, and you're really fortunate that it sits off of 99, and it's got these unique qualities of having the park, and you've got now this beautiful library and the movie theater and the grocery store, and you've got housing, and so you're uniquely positioned to do a project like this. And that's what I got excited about. There's so many things to talk about. I'd be happy to answer questions that you might have. And I just wanted to add a little bit of depth to some of the questions that you were asking, and they're good questions to ask. It's a big contribution on the part of the public sector as well as the private sector. And one thing to put into context, when you're looking at the Dahlia, we've finished a project very similar to this in Portland last year, and we paid $550,000 for the land. And so, when you're looking at what's it going to take, the value of the land is really established by what you can afford to do with it. And so, ostensibly this adds up to $2.2 million, but I can't make it add up to $2.2 million. In addition, the rents in Canby are about 40 to 50%, 50 cents a square foot less. So when you're building it and developing your budget, you have to make sure that they balance. And so that's the juggle that we've had, and I've worked really closely with Rick and Renata on this. I have a very large civic commitment, and so to me it's really important that those are justifiable numbers. In addition, the construction prices have gone up dramatically because of the market being so hot right now. And so there are a number of things. I mean, this is it's a really visionary project, but it's also a really challenging one. And there are a lot of pieces to this, and it's a very interesting project to do. There are no comparables for it, none. So in trying to get investors to believe in it and get lenders to believe in it and economists and appraisers, you kind of have to just make a very compelling case for that the elements that are present that make it work. And one of the things that's challenging on this as well is we're going to end up with like 20,000 square feet of retail space, and that's not what most housing developers want to end up with. We finished our building last year, and it's still vacant, the retail piece, and it's only it's under 2,000 square feet. So again, the risks are tremendous. We've got a complete unknown here with a lot of the things. We still are working through the replat, the environmental, the market study, and the BOLI. So there are just, when there are easier projects to do, which there are right now, anywhere in the region, you can actually buy the land in a much more straightforward fashion without the disposition and development agreement and all the terms that you're kind of committing to. Just buy the land and start developing, and this has been 2 years so far. So I would just, part of it is really making all these pieces work, and we've gotten to the place where we have, which is why it's being presented tonight, and I think it's an incredibly exciting project, and I think it'll do a lot for your community. It's my sister lives over in Aurora, Donald, and another one teaches in West Lynn, Wilsonville, and so I get to hear their two different perspectives on the region. And I know that she's anxious to preserve the farmland, and one way you do that is to create communities like this where people can live and kind of come and see their neighbors and have activation and go to a restaurant, and we're creating a little garden between the two buildings. So there's a lot of elements to this that should really support and activate your downtown, as well as activate all the other businesses that are here. It'll raise the standard for some of the real estate that's down here. I've been approached by different businesses that would like a place to stay and gone into some of the buildings, and they could use a little love, a little TLC, and this might raise the bar for that. So, it does so much for the community that for me it's a really wonderful culmination of the work that I've been committed to for years, and I feel like it's a real privilege to work with Canby and the people here and the understanding of what's going on and your staff, and I would be happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
I would also add that Mary's background is actually in urban planning. Before she went into development, she was an urban planner, so she understands what she's doing from a community perspective, which is unusual for developers. They usually just see the bottom line, but Mary's looking at this project as much for its benefits to us as she is for the potential for her. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have John Southgate. And John, come on up, and would you, for the audience, remind us of the role that you've played in this project as well?
Great. Yeah, and Rick, I hope it's okay that I'm coming up and testifying as, I don't know if I'm a citizen or something else, but...
Well, I identified you as a project team member, so
okay.
That's great to have you
Project
right
team
here.
member. There was an accident on I-5, so I apologize I got here so late. But yeah, I have been consulting, actually I was thinking it was a little over 2 years when I got a call from Renata, I think I was at the airport, and said there's this little project that she's working on, and you were just coming on board, Amanda was in charge, and so my role has been to help the city with the selection process, and I really just want to say that it is an honor to have been part of your team, and I really encourage you should take great pride in what you're doing tonight. And I've had the privilege of knowing Mary for, well, I won't say, but actually I've known Mary for a long time, and she has a stellar reputation. I think Rick and Renata picked up, and hopefully you did as well, right away that this is an honorable person with integrity. And if you haven't seen her project up there in Kenton, up in North Portland, you should take a look at it, because there's some similarities. She does high quality work. She gets the top architects, top contractors. It's going to be a project that I know you're going to be proud of, and in 10 or 20 years you're going to look back, and this is going to be be your legacy. And so you're lucky to have Mary work on this project. You're lucky to have the staff you have. I mean, I've been doing urban renewal projects for decades, and I just think Canby is a stellar example. I tell your story. So anyway, I want you to be proud of yourself, and I want to thank you really from the bottom of my heart for letting me be a part of this process. So, yeah.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Do we have any other proponents, those who wish to speak in favor of the project, that would like to address the agency? And seeing none, do we have any opponents, those who are opposed to the project? And seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And we'll now go back to questions by the agency. Does anyone have any more questions for Rick or directly for Mary or John? Clint?
I just have a comment. I've not met you, Mary, but I just so appreciate that you recognize Canby and have invested your time and hopefully your money soon to put this together. And I'm really excited about this project, and you know, the people that's been echoed, the work for the city and everyone that's been involved in this. We're so fortunate to have such a great team working on this, so I'm very excited about it.
Questions, comments?
Oh, can I?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. I'll echo that. Thanks for taking a chance on us. We're proud of our community, and this will make it even better. Yeah.
Commissioner Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, I'm wondering if we should point out for the record, given the amount of information that was presented tonight, this is not our first time reviewing this information, that we've had a work session and we've gone through this. I'm sorry for Councilor Smith having to go through all of this within a couple of weeks, but we've been getting ginned up to speed on this. Secondly, I guess it is fashionable to talk about Mary tonight. I only know one important person, and that's Dyke Dane, who built this little project in Portland, the South Waterfront. And I called him up early in this process, and I said, what do you think about Mary? Dyke's one of these people who doesn't use many words. He said, I trust her. That was all he had to say about her. So if we have to partner up with somebody, I want somebody I can trust. It's funny. Planning is a lonely job. I'm thinking about how packed our chambers were when we were talking about who should be in a parade or what our response should be to a gun resolution in the Oregon legislature. The future does not have a built-in constituency. That's our job. We're 7 people who have a role different from everybody else in this community, and that's to stand as high on our tippy toes and look as far into the future as we can. Reflection's easy, to take a look in the back, but to look ahead, this is probably our hardest job. So thanks to both this current agency and past agencies that have gotten us to this part. As you folks have heard me say for years now, that for each person you have living downtown, that's another $9,000 to $10,000 into the pocketbooks of our downtown. So I see this as being key to achieving a strategic goal of having a vital downtown.
Any further discussion by the agency at this time? You'll get one more chance. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing portion on the agenda, and we'll move into resolutions and ordinances. Rick?
Yes, you have before you the resolution disposition and development agreement. I better start that. Resolution of the Canby Urban Renewal Agency to declare your intent for the furtherance of the public interest to authorize the execution of the disposition and development agreement with Canby Civic Block LLC, and its sole officer at the time, Mary Hanlon, and directing the Urban Renewal Agency Director to take all steps necessary to implement the terms of the agreement and facilitate the conveyance of the property identified herein.
So in short, it's to approve the DDA that's in your packet, the agreement, and to authorize Rick to carry it out. Do you have any further questions? Any further discussion on the matter?
Sure.
Mr. Vice Chair, would you like to do the honors?
I would love to make the motion. I move to approve resolution number URR 16-006, a resolution of the Canby Urban Renewal Agency, URA, declaring its intent for the furtherance of the public interest to authorize the execution of the disposition and development agreement with the Canby Civic Block LLC, and directing the Urban Renewal Agency Director to take all steps necessary to implement the terms of the agreement and to facilitate the conveyance of the certain real property identified herein.
Second.
It's been moved by Vice Chair Hodson, seconded by Commissioner Coleman, to approve URR 16-006, a resolution of the Canby Urban Renewal Agency declaring its intent for the furtherance of the public interest to authorize the execution of the disposition and development agreement with Canby City Block LLC, and directing the Urban Renewal Agency Director to take all steps necessary to implement the terms of the agreement and to facilitate the conveyance of the certain real property identified herein. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution passes. And a round of applause. My thanks to the agency and to staff, to Mary, to John. It's been my pleasure to be the chair over the course of most of this work. It is truly generational. It is truly transformational. To use a phrase that Commissioner Parker taught me when I first came on 5 years ago, we do get the unique job of planting trees that our grandchildren will enjoy the shade of. Fortunately, this tree will grow up a lot quicker, but it has been a great pleasure. Thank you so much, Mary, for your great confidence in our fair city. We deeply appreciate it. Mr. Administrator, do we have any further business for the agency tonight?
Only one omission, and my apologies for this, because there is no excuse. To put a document like this together and to get it prepared for signature and to get it in the agenda doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens only because Kim finds the mistakes and corrects them and makes everything work. And I want to express my appreciation to her.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you very much.
That's all I have.
Well, another banner day for Canby and for the agency in a great year, 2016. Thank you very much for Canby for your confidence in us. I wish you all a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, enjoy your holidays, and just a great New Year. And we look forward, all of us, to serving you in 2017. There'll be a couple new faces coming up here, but thank you very much. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Commissioner Hensley, seconded by Vice Chair Hodson, that we adjourn. It is not debatable. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.